Welcome. First of all, I would like to thank Yesam for giving me this opportunity to make such a presentation here today. And I feel quite privileged to have such an audience. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm so glad, once again, how coffee brings people together, how powerful it is in terms of attracting people. So, our companionship with Turkish coffee, by the way, I'm not alone, that's why I'm using we and ours, dates back to mid-80s, when I got married to my loving husband, Murat. And at that time, I was a new graduate in the Faculty of Architecture and also became an assistant at the same faculty. Me and my husband, have always been after good coffee, and I personally myself owe much about good coffee to one person, the coffee making man, Hasan Bey, and we were calling him Hasan Abi at that time. And there's a coffee and tea room in our faculty building, allocated to the academics and the staff together. Tea was served there twice a day, first at 10:30 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon. And coffee was served only just once after the lunch. That man was one of the person that I respected a lot in the faculty, because he respected a lot what he was doing. He was a craftsman, and he was a meticulous man. I hope he's surviving still, but he's retired now. He was from that Hasan Abi, retired from the faculty, and he was from Erzurum, and he always prepared good coffee for us, good coffee and good tea, and he never let the coffee be among the wholesale purchases in the faculty, like sugar, A4 paper, or toilet paper. He was always buying his coffee from a particular shop and keeping it in airtight jars. And he set the standards quite high, and I'm grateful to him for developing my appetite and culture of Turkish coffee. Yes, as I have said, we are always after good coffee, wherever we are, and in time we also started to be after good cups of coffee. That's to say, we started to collect beautiful coffee cups. Then things had become a bit complicated and more pleasurable at the same time for both of us. Now the coffee must be perfect and the cup must be a special one. So the cups were followed by everything related with Turkish coffee. That's to say, all paraphernalia about Turkish coffee. So that's our short story. So coffee is not a mere beverage. It's a social beverage. So it's a heartwarming social beverage. It warms our insides, it makes our hearts beat faster, it is sometimes consoling, or it becomes sometimes rewarding. So, when did we humans start to drink coffee? We owe much to goats for that. And according to a legend, there are a lot of legends and myths and stories about the origins of coffee. And the origins of coffee traced to Ethiopia, and it is mostly embellished with colorful stories. Let me tell you the most popular one. One day, a shepherd noticed that his flock was unusually energetic, and they didn't want to stop. They are jumping, playing, didn't want to sleep. So he was a bit surprised and anxious about what's happening, and he decided to visit the neighboring monastery and take the advice of the chief monk yesterday. And he went to the monastery next day and waited for an explanation for this strange situation. So the monk said that, so take your flock to the same place and try to observe them during the whole day. Is there something happening strange? Do they eat something different, new? So that next day he went out with his flock and then spent the whole day watching the flock, each goat, and then he realized that they are eating a different shrub, something unusual. So take some branches and leaves, and then the same day he went to the same monastery and find the chief monk and said that, okay, I think I found the reason. They are eating this plant, these leaves. So the monk took the leaves and the plant, and then they tried to taste it. They first chilled it and then maybe boiled it, I don't know. But then they suddenly realized that that plant is something new, they didn't know. It gives energy, it is stimulating, so they don't need to sleep after eating it. So, there are many stories like that. That one, this story is preferred generally by this story is preferred mostly by Western writers. Coffee was food in these earliest times. The aborigines of Abyssinia, in other words Ethiopia, chewed the leaves and the fruits of the plant like goats, and they invented new formulas to consume it, to benefit from the coffee plant. They smashed the fruits and the leaves, and then they add animal fat in it. They mixed it with fat and prepared a kind of paste, and then mold this paste into different chunks for being used later. That was giving comfort and stimulate them, especially during their long journeys in harsh conditions during the wars in the desert. So, coffee migrated to Yemen from Ethiopia. You see here, we have two maps similar to each other. One is including Ethiopia in a larger scale, the other one showing the Yemen part. As you see, these two lands are very close to each other. There is Red Sea in between, so they have quite similar climatic conditions, quite similar geographic conditions, same mountainous area, so the similar perfect conditions for coffee growing. This short hop across this Red Sea played a significant role in the history of humanity. Regarding the origins of coffee as a beverage, we can say two things based on the accounts. Coffee as a drink is traced to Yemen. It's the first thing that we are sure. And the second is coffee became popular among the Sufi religious sects, and because of its energizing and mind-opening effects. It was a perfect companion for these people who had devotional exercises during long nights. During these nights, it promoted wakefulness and stimulated the mind. The man named Ali ibn Ömer esh-Shazili, living in Mocha, is mentioned in many sources. And when he was in exile in the desert in Yemen, Mocha is a city in the Arabian Peninsula, in the southwest part of the peninsula in Yemen, here, the closest point to Ethiopia. And it was a very significant port also. That man, Shazili, was living in Mocha, but he was in exile in the desert, and while he was starving in the desert, he started to eat berries in this hopeless condition. So then he started to recover and feel himself very energetic, and then he started to. Some people came to visit him. Some sick people, some people need his support. So he started to offer these berries to these people. And then they started to feel themselves fine, they started to recover. Then this story spread in the city, and he became the patron saint of the city, came back to the city, and he's always named as a significant person for the city. So one thing is common in all of these stories is the coffee was described with its healing properties and creating miracles as a medicine. Then let us have a quick look at the journey of coffee in this map. So it starts in Ethiopia, then moves to Mocha, and then it moves to Mecca, mid-15th century. Towards the beginning of the 16th century, it was widespread in Mecca, in middle part of the Arabian Peninsula. There is one thing that we can definitely say is that in the mid-15th century, in the Muslim countries, in all of the Muslim countries, all was drinking coffee. This is the date, approximately, the conquer of Istanbul. I mean, when the Ottomans got Istanbul in mid-15th century, all Islamic world was drinking coffee. Well, of course, when the number of coffee houses increased, oppositions had started by many people, by religious authorities, imams, and pious Muslims. And it started to move towards north, and it moved to Egypt, Cairo, around 1510. And then it moved to Halep and Damascus. In Egypt, we know that in Al-Azhar University, people coming from Yemen were started to drink coffee and introduced people this drink. So these, again, these Sufi people from Yemen introduced coffee to Egypt. So around 1510, it is a widespread drink in Egypt, in Cairo. Here, I should mention one historian, celebrated historian, Cemal Kafadar, and he mentions in his forthcoming publication about the first driving coffee houses in the world was along the river Nile. So while coffee was in Egypt, it was consumed. There was coffee houses both along the shores of Nile and boats were, those sailing boats on the river were parking in front of those coffee houses, and then in order to take their coffee directly to their boats and continue to their journey. From Egypt, it moved to Halep and Damascus, as we said, and then to Istanbul in mid-16th century, in 1554. There are different dates about that. There are some people say that it's 1555 or 1551, but around these dates, the first coffee houses were opened in Istanbul, in Tahtakale area, by two men from Damascus and Aleppo, Hakem from Aleppo and Shams from Damascus. These two men were merchants. They had trade with Istanbul. So at this time, in the 16th century, this part of Istanbul is a very important center of commerce. It was populated by different people, by foreign people coming from all over the world, occupied by different professions. It was quite a populated and dense area. And the coffee houses started to spread very quickly in this area, because they provided perfect environment for such people to come together, to talk about their daily life, their professions, to share their knowledge of the profession, speculate about the daily things, and etc. So it had become an indispensable part of everyday life in the Ottoman world. An English doctor writes about that, and he says that when a Turk is sick, he fasts and takes coffee. If it will not do, he makes his own will and thinks of no other medicine. So along this journey, of course, before it became public and it became commercial, that means consumed in a coffee house, it should have been consumed privately, to my opinion, but we don't have any evidence, any account, any document about that between these days from Damascus and Aleppo to Istanbul, in these two places, what had happened, in which places coffee was started to be consumed in private spaces other than the coffee houses. We don't know much about that. But we know one thing. Again, we are thankful to Mr. Kafadar, Professor Kafadar from Harvard University. In his study, which will be published soon, he's saying that there was a coffee room in Barbaros Hayrettin Pasha's house in Istanbul. So the date is 1539. So Barbaros Hayrettin Pasha, he was the chief commander of the Ottoman Navy, as we all know, and he had a big house. And in this house, he had a special coffee room. So this is a very important account, very important evidence about the consumption of coffee privately, other than the coffee house. So we know that before the first coffee house in Istanbul, people was drinking coffee in their houses. Probably the important people, wealthy people who can afford coffee, because at that time it was not a cheap product. So I hope we'll be able to acquire more information in time with the help of this kind of research about the consumption of coffee throughout Anatolia, throughout the Ottoman Empire. So our journey continues, and coffee does not stop in Istanbul, of course. It continues to move to Europe. The first stop is Venice in 1645. Venice was the entrance port, a very significant port to Europe in the Mediterranean region for coffee and for other products as well. And Italy was the first country in Europe to import coffee. First coffee house in Italy was opened in Livorno in 1651, and by the end of the same century, by the end of the 17th century, first coffee house was opened in Venice, Cafe Florian, the famous one. At this point, I would like to mention the name of a gentleman from Italy, again from the same region, Prosper Alpinus. He was from Padua, and he was a physician and botanist as well. He was the first European figure who talked about coffee, but not the coffee as a drink, but the coffee as a plant. He went to Egypt in 1580. He was in the delegation of the Venetian Republican Consular. At that time, the European kings and Ottoman rulers had always a delegation of artists, writers, scientists, and physicians accompanying them while they went to visit or conquer some place. Unlike today. Today also presidents, prime ministers, accompanied by a crowd of people, but this time this crowd is composed of general businessmen, industrialists, ministers, and etc. And Prosper Alpinus stayed in Egypt 4 years until 1584 and wrote a book about plants and medicines that he first saw, he first observed in Egypt, and coffee was among these plants. In his book, which is published in 1592, he emphasized the nutritional and medicinal aspects of the plant. Then coffee moved to Britain. In 1650, the first coffee house is opened in Oxford, the first cafe in Britain. This building is today, the cafe is located here, but this is not the original building. It is demolished, and then the new one is built instead of that. But it is still surviving. The name is Grand Cafe, so that you can go and have your coffee there. They serve very good coffee. I was there last summer. So it is not surprising to see coffee houses opened in Britain, because it was one of the first countries to start importing coffee. In 1652, the first coffee house, named Pascal Rose, was opened in London, and throughout Britain many coffee houses continued to open, and in 1655 the Royal Society was established in a coffee house in Oxford, because the people frequenting the coffee house were scientists, writers, artists, very intellectual people. They meet there, they discuss, they share their knowledge, they have their coffee, and they study there, they read there, they make their research there maybe. And in time, these places become coffee houses. So one example, the first example, is the Royal Society in Oxford. And the first man, the three men, Hans Sloane, Edmund Halley, and Isaac Newton, were three people, three important figures who were there and established that Royal Society. And in 1683, there was 2,000 coffee houses in London. Among these, some of them are very interesting. there is a coffee house named Turk's Head. It was in Westminster. In that coffee house, there were pennies used for coffee. You see, there is a Turkish man, the figure in one side of the penny, and the other side includes the address of the place. So this penny was used for coffee instead of money. This is specially produced for that coffee house. So after Britain, coffee moved to Vienna approximately around the same dates, in 1683. And there is another story, a very popular one about that. The Polish citizen Franz Kolczynski opened the first coffee house in Vienna. He was, as a thank to his heroism during the siege of the city by the Ottomans, he had the right to open the first coffee house in the city because during the siege, he bravely slipped through the enemy and carried messages to the Austrians, so that as a gift, he had the right to open the first coffee house. What is significant about that coffee house is that the first coffee, which is common today, the first coffee without froth, without grounds, this filtered coffee is percolated coffee, is prepared in this cafe by Kolczynski. And then coffee moved to Paris, to France. The first coffee house was Le Café Prokop. It is still surviving today. And then to the New World, to the America, and then to South America, which is known by most of the people as the homeland of the coffee, Brazil. The coffee was introduced at the beginning of the first quarter of the 18th century. And let us, after that short trip of coffee, let us have a look at the etymology of the word coffee. I have noted down 3 words here. The first one is kahwa, which is an Arabic word. The other is kafa and kuba. Kahwa, as you see, these 3 letters, Q, H, and Y, they mean in the Arabic language, they mean making something objectionable, repulsive, or exciting distaste. So it's an Arabic word and was used long before coffee was known in the Arabic-speaking world. Some Arabic lexicographers equals this word kahwa with wine, because again, wine makes your appetite, changes your appetite, it makes you distasteful, you don't want to eat anything after wine, so they prefer to equal that kahwa with wine at that time. And the other word is kafa. It is just a name of a region in Ethiopia, and it is we can say that it is a nice coincidence with the name of the place and the name of the drink. Probably they first called this plant as kafa because of referring to the name of the place. And finally, there is a word kuva, which means strength and power, and it could have the word kafa could have been derived from this word kuva, the Arabic word kuva, meaning, strength, and power because of its invigorating effects, because of its healing effects, as we have mentioned before. So, when was Turkish coffee started? How it evolved? We don't know much about that. At least I don't know any definite date, any definite time or place documented regarding the first Turkish coffee. Written sources that we have so far are more focused on the history of coffee. And during this, in these accounts, there are big jumps. They generally mention the names, they give names and dates about all the places, first coffee houses, first imports, etc. Then, okay, this requires a separate discussion about the historiography, which is not our specialty today, not our focus. We have visual documents, photographs, engravings showing us scenes from coffee houses and from everyday life in the Ottoman geography, where coffee was at the center of life, and some verbal descriptions related to that. So, using all these information, we can make some estimations about when the Turkish coffee, the Turkish coffee with this hot frothed liquid invented and started to be consumed. We need more research for that. So what are the features of Turkish coffee? What are the characteristics of Turkish coffee? Let us elaborate about that. Turkish coffee is not a takeaway drink. You cannot take it while you are cycling, while you are drinking. You have to have a comfortable environment, you have to have your comfortable seat, you have favorite, I don't know, the costumes, maybe your favorite cup, your favorite candies, accompanying coffee. So it's a prolonged pleasure. You always want to extend this time of that pleasure. So it was at every corner in Ottoman times. The photograph on the left-hand side is from those from Istanbul, from those towards the end of 19th century. It was one of the makeshift coffee places. In one corner of the street, man is preparing coffee, and the other man, you see how he is enjoying his coffee with his pipe and with his small chair. Turkish coffee should not be wasted, and you should beware, and you might be wasting your future, because you can delineate stories in the cup. So the cup reading, as you know, is a very an important part of this Turkish coffee pleasure, Turkish coffee ritual, I may say. It is the sine qua non, I may say, of the Turkish coffee drinking. And the wit of Turkish people is very quick to develop ways of giving service in that sector, you see. And design and technology are always in your service. You can download immediately. If you have iPhone, I think many of you have your iPhone, so that you can immediately download this and then have your future in your hand. And on the other hand, there is, on the right-hand side, there is a special coffee cup designed just for a perfect coffee cup reading. You see the ornamented outer surface is very nice. When you are drinking your coffee, you see these patterns, these decorations. But when you finish your coffee, and when the cup starts to cool down, when you put it upside down in order to have your cup reading, the patterns, the decorations on the surface start to disappear, so that it becomes a white, empty surface, a perfect one for reading the future in it, so that the reader can concentrate in the inner surface. Turkish coffee is the most critical ritual on the way to the marriage. It is again the sine qua non of this ritual. While, I mean, these two young people decide to get married, the young man, visits the girl with his family at her home, and the coffee is offered to the guests, to this young man and his family. And if she wants to get married with him, then she prepares good coffee with sugar. And when she doesn't want to get married with that gentleman, she adds some salt in it, so that this is a very strong message about the future of this relationship. So, coffee is at the service of woman. You know, woman is woman every time, everywhere. And in the old times, there was no Chanel, there was no Guerlain, there was no Yves Saint Laurent, and they need to have some makeup. So the ambulant coffee makers were very popular among women because they provide soot for the eyeliner. So you see here, this is a coffee roaster. The soot collected in the roasting pan was taken by women, and they prepare their eyeliner in these. They prepare their eyeliner and then put in these nice, beautiful bottles. So that I don't know whether in these times this ambulant coffee maker was shouting in the street like fresh soot, like tomato today, but. That he was very popular, not for his coffee, but for the soup. Coffee is always the symbol of, Turkish coffee is always the symbol of hospitality, an enduring friendship and respect. We have a saying in Turkish about that, a very famous saying: the coffee offered initiates 40 years of enduring friendship, respect, and hospitality. It is, on the other hand, it's a capricious beverage. It must be served and drunk immediately after it's ready, because there is a deep froth on the surface, so this deep froth is quite delicate, I may say. You have to be patient while waiting your coffee, the coffee you want. But whenever it is ready, you have to sip it promptly without losing the froth, without cooling it, so in order to maximize the enjoyment. And Turkish coffee requires a good craftsmanship. Because it's a delicate process of preparation. In these two pictures, you see a coffee house in the Ottoman geography. You see how well organized this coffee house. And the coffee making man, how well dressed, how he's preparing his the coffee, and how he placed everything he needs. Everything should be at hand, very clean, well organized, so that he can make a good coffee. And on the other hand, this is a picture from a workshop manufacturing the coffee utensils, coffee cups. This coffee preparation, which requires a craftsmanship, has different stages, and it is part of the Turkish coffee ritual, a very significant part of the ritual. So that we can say that there are two stages in this ritual. One is preparation, the second is serving, the last one is drinking. And this preparation stage includes various other sub-stages: roasting, cooling, grinding, storing, and brewing. All of these stages require a very good coordination of hand and mind, very good timing, good monitoring, because timing is very important while you are preparing the coffee. If we start with roasting, roasting stage is very critical in terms of defining the acidity and bitterness of coffee. You see here two examples of braziers, this one and that one, and two roasting spoons. This one is, of course, this is a brazier used for roasting, used for brewing also. It includes, it has the fire in it, so when it becomes the fire, becomes the amber, so it's the right time to put your coffee pot on it, put your, the pan on it, and then roast coffee, and then put your coffee pot and then brew it. So the other one is a more commercial one, I may say. This is generally used for the coffee corners in the streets, in makeshift coffee corners. You see a cylindrical part rotating over the fire. Fire is here, so that these cylindrical drums include the coffee beans, and while they are revolving, the coffee beans equally, homogeneously roasted. These two spoons are for different scales. They can get very small amounts of coffee beans. Of course, for Turkish coffee, freshness is very important. So the ideal situation is to roast small amounts of Turkish coffee, amounts of beans, and then consume it. So these two spoons are perfect for that. The one on the left-hand side is more ornamented. It has an additional spoon, as you see. This spoon is for moving the coffee beans in the spoon in order to achieve the homogeneity of the roasting. And the other one is more simpler one, but this has another detail. The handle is folded so that it could be carried in another place practically. So the next stage is cooling. You see, I'm sorry for the slide in the middle. I don't know what has happened, but something has happened when I have installed the visuals on my presentation. So this is a cooling box, cooler with a lid, and there's a bird over the lid. Anyway, generally wood is used for these cooling pans, and these cooling pans are very old examples from Anatolia. And generally the local wood is used for these cooling pans. They are small, like this size, 25, 20 centimeter in diameter. It was perfect for, wood was perfect for absorbing the excess of oil on the beans, because when coffee beans roasted, oil comes out. So that if they roasted a bit more, then the excess oil, which we don't want, should be absorbed in a way. So the wooden cooling pans are perfect for that. And the nature is always the inspiration for the craftsman. You see these 3 cooling pans out of wood, and this is one of the rare examples. This is an earthenware cooling pan from Kütahya area. This is one of the rare surviving examples. Probably it's because the fragility of the material, this earthenware, the wood is more durable. Then comes the pounding stage. It's the oldest method in the world, this pounding, and we have very intricate, very nice examples of mortars and pestles, you see. Another method of achieving the powdered coffee is grinding. This is a Turkish way of getting a fine powdered coffee. These grinders they are Turkish grinders, they are special ones. And these are out of wood. These are brass, wood, brass, leather combination. These are, again, very old examples. And the difference between pounding and grinding is related with the movement of this the getting powder, because in pounding process you smash the beans with the pestle, so it becomes a bit you smear the beans, the oily beans, and then you achieve the end result is quite different than the grinded one, because in the grinded one you crush the beans into very small particles in order to get a fine powdered coffee. Then the resulting taste is different, and the Turkish coffee aficionados always prefer the pounded coffee. We call it dibek kahvesi. We call these pounders dibek. It's a Turkish word. They prefer dibek kahvesi. It's more tasteful. And then comes the storing stage. As I said before, the ideal situation, the ideal condition is to prepare Turkish coffee in small amounts. Roast it in small amounts, cool it, grind it, and then brew it, and then it's finished. But if you feel the need to store it, if you have excess coffee, you need some storage space. So these boxes are for that. As you very well know, coffee is vulnerable to heat, light, and moisture. So that's why we need to keep them in airtight boxes and jars. These are, again, examples from Anatolia. These two are wooden ones. This is brass, and this is copper. You see, the one in the middle has different chambers. A chamber for spoon, and the chamber, the major chamber, is for coffee. These are other examples of boxes. This time there are two sections for coffee and sugar. These are more simpler examples, used generally in coffee houses, these two. This one is gilded copper, which is probably used in palaces by the wealthy people. This is an example from Balkan area, out of copper. And the wood one, sometimes the pounding and the storing occurs in the same utensil. This acts as a box and as a pounding, as a mortar, I guess. So it's quite interesting. Then comes the brewing stage. This stage is, there are braziers always in order to prepare coffee in the Ottoman times. You see here in the coffee house, the coffee making man is preparing coffee in front of the guests. So this brewing process becomes a social one also. It is at the center of this gathering. So people watching their coffee prepared here while they're having their tobaccos and nargiles, and watch the coffee making man. So from the most ornamented silver one to the simple and basic copper one, braziers are always at the center of this activity of coffee making. The one in the middle is out of earthenware. Again, this is from Çanakkale area. It's a comparatively small one. And this one is out of silver for the wealthy. Again, the coffee pots accompanying the brazier are out of silver. And the coffee on embers is the center of attraction for woman and man always. And as I have said, the fire in the brazier and the coffee on the fire is always the center of attraction. During the brewing process, two types of utensils were used. First, ibriks, we call them, they were called ibriki kahve because we have different ibriks also for other liquids, for water and everything. And there is ibriki kahve also. You see different types of ibriki kahves, different sizes. So this is the craftsman, the master craftsman in the palace, the kahveci başı. Because when coffee become widespread in the everyday life, so a new expertise came out, the kahveci başı, the coffee making man. So in the palace there was a man who has quite a high rank in the hierarchy of the palace. He was a respectable man. His duty was only preparing coffee and serving it appropriately. And this is another scene from while coffee is served with those in the splendid environment, very ornamented ibriki kahve. And on the street, you see the coffee house. In this coffee house, you see this type of ibrik, which is similar to that. So it is for for a coffee which is different than Turkish coffee. So in most of the sources, in visual sources, we have such kind of scenes in which you see such kind of ibriks of this size, in big sizes, and these small cups, so that could be served to many people. So this coffee is a bit different than Turkish coffee. And this is another example of ibrik, which is a self-sufficient one, I guess. There was amber underneath, this beneath, so it is kept hot. And there is some kind of a transition from ibriki kahve to cezve in the history of Turkish coffee. There comes some coffee pots with lids, you see. Some of them have folded handles in order to make this transportation easier, because coffee should be prepared everywhere, every time, every corner. So you see these ibriki, these cezves in the middle, in between the ibriki kahves and cezves, which are this. These two are cezves, by which you can prepare the real Turkish coffee. So this, again, this is one of the questions I would like to raise, is that the real Turkish coffee, this 40 hot liquid, when it is started to be brewed, and where. We have some information about that. Some sources, some historians make research about that. These two photographs are from Anatolia, mid-Anatolia, from Sivas area. These are the gravestones. The gravestones of a coffee man, probably. You see the reliefs on the surface of his grave, this pounding, this mortar, ibrik, coffee pot, the cooler probably, and jezve. You see here again jezve. The date is mid-18th century. So we may say that in mid-18th century there was these jezve, this kind of jezve, and people started to consume Turkish coffee. I don't know, I'm not sure, but that is one of the areas of research which is waiting for us, I think, because the information until now, the documents we have until now, doesn't give enough answer to this question. So, serving is a ritual by itself. It is, in this advertisement, in this poster, you see, it is very well explained, I think, because in this advertisement, the Turkish coffee is promoted not a drink by itself, but with the serving ritual of this drink. And it is a very famous company, the biggest company in Turkey, who's producing Turkish coffee for years. Their headquarters in Istanbul, in the area that the first coffee house was opened, this Kuru Kahvesi, and this picture is very, I find this very important because it really conveys this message that Turkish coffee is always remembered with certain rituals around it. Not only the cup itself, not only the drink itself, but the whole culture and the rituals around it. So the serving is, serving with style always is important, and for the wealthy people, there is no end to it, as you see. These envelopes, jeweled ones, the fine porcelain, these textiles for serving, the coffee. These all have a style, and coffee should be served hot and fresh, while served with style, of course. So we have this kind of instruments, we call them still, this three-roped, this suspended instrument, holding coffee pot hot, and then you can take this, you can carry the coffee fresh and hot to the main space, to the reception space, and you can serve your coffee. And then the final stage of the Turkish coffee ritual is the drinking part. It is the most pleasurable part, and these are cups of pleasure. These are examples that I have selected for you. The most, maybe the oldest one is from Kütahya area, and this is probably used in Topkapı Palace. This porcelain came from China, because at that time porcelain was not manufactured in Europe. They were importing it from China, the palace. So they were embellishing them with certain jewels, those chinas, and as you see, there is no end to it, to this pleasure. There are different cups, different styles. Most of them manufactured in Europe. These examples, this one, because the Ottoman land was very important for Europe porcelain manufacturers. Starting by the beginning of 19th century, they started to manufacture porcelain, especially for the Ottoman palace, for the Ottoman land. So the palace started to import porcelain from Europe. So they specially designed cups for Turkish coffee, for this special drink. And then we come to the highly pleasurable cup. This is one of the rare examples of the coffee cup. You see there is no handle on it. There is no saucer. But there is one thing in the middle. It's a small chamber out of silver. It is a perforated silver chamber you see in this cross section. It is for something making coffee more pleasurable. Sometimes opium, sometimes amber, sometimes, I don't know, some other spices. So that it is, these substances were hidden in this chamber, and then when you are sipping your coffee, you start to get the flavor, you start to get the taste, and you start to, your pleasure is increased. Then, of course, in terms of coffee cups, we have different parameters regarding the Turkish coffee cup. These parameters can be listed as the size, the form, the shape, the form, and the decoration of the cup. And these parameters, of course, while we are choosing our cup, it depends. It depends where we are drinking our coffee, when we are drinking our coffee. It depends our mood. It depends with whom we are drinking our coffee. But among these parameters, one is, and all of these parameters determines the pleasure that we get out of Turkish coffee. But among these, the size comes in front. It is very significant because size, as well as the others, size gives a certain message to you. Size connotes some meanings. In Turkey, we have different sizes of cups, from small to big. We have kallavi cups. We call them kallavi, the big one, containing the largest amount of Turkish coffee. So the Turkish ladies call these kallavi cups as friendly cups. We call it dost fincanı. Dost means friend. So we offer coffee to our best friends with those kallavi cups, because if we want to elongate this pleasure, if we want to extend this pleasure, so that we use the big one, as Yesam today will offer us the Turkish coffee with such kind of the big cups. So you can pick up your size among these 3 cups for your coffee. Thank you very much.